us. 13% if you're in the city that I'm in, Toronto, or the Golden Horseshoe, you know, Mississauga, Exeter, Ajax, York Region, blah, blah, blah.
What's 13%?
And then the amount of employable Black people.
Oh, okay. We're not talking aviation. We're talking employable.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and then to say on top of that 13%, we want to see them in everything. When we're sharing the few Black people we have with jails and gangs, it's just going to be challenging because there's not enough exposure. So when you see a Black person in it's always, oh my gosh, and I don't know how to explain this. Sometimes it's genuine. Oh my goodness, I just never see people in this industry, or it's I don't want to say this the wrong way.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah, I want to say, oh, I didn't know Black people could do this sort of kind of thing. But it's just that if there's not a lot of us to begin with, it's difficult to spread us out.
This is already the most interesting conversation I think I've had on the webinars. Like, I love all the webinars, but this already, and we haven't even started the conversation, is so intriguing to me. Like, and I think it will be to the people watching. So just so you know, I want to tell you guys a few things because we're going to talk about all this stuff. One, if I say anything inappropriate, you know it comes from a heart of love, and you can tell me that. Like, just say, well, Kendra, I wouldn't say it that way, or something, because we do want to educate me and everyone else on what we should do, what we should say if we say something wrong. Like, one of the questions I had for a couple of you was, can I say that I have 3 wonderful Black women on my panel? I don't know. Like, so I'm going to actually bring that up during our talk, because I was taught for a long time you could only say African American. And so I kind of avoided anything because like, to me, we're humans, but now I'm even learning thinking that is wrong. So we'll get into all that. But so if I say anything wrong, let me know. If anyone asks the question, including me, that you don't want to answer, you either say you don't want to answer it, or just don't answer it, or answer it however you want to steer the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to particularly answer the question. You can go, oh, well, and then go into something else, sort of. Do you know what I mean? Like, so don't feel pressure to have to answer anything. And the third thing I really want to tell you is, if I don't look like I'm paying attention to you, because I always feel really bad about this, I'm going to be watching the chat for questions, and I have my questions, and I have Facebook on. So if I look like I'm not listening to you because I'm looking away, I'm just scanning through the questions. So I'm trying to listen to what you're saying, plus go through their questions, see what's appropriate, what's not appropriate to ask you guys. So please don't think that I'm not paying attention. If I look like I'm like, you know, you'll be like, what's Kendra doing? I'm just kind of trying to go through the questions and stuff too. So anyway, that's it. That's all I really want to tell you guys.
Excellent.
Yeah. So Zoey, thank you. Thank you for introducing us to Johannah. Johannah, it is pronounced Johannah. It's spelled a little different, so it's just Johannah. Okay. Yeah, Zoey, just thank you for this introduction.
No problem, my pleasure.
And Rumbi works for Jazz, and I do believe there's going to be a number of Jazz people watching, because Laurel emailed me and asked if she could share it through their company. So we might have a few people from there watching as well. So yeah. So if you guys are looking for a job with Jazz, this could be it. No.
Also, I did send the email with kind of the order of questions, or who wanted to answer and who didn't. I don't know if you saw that by chance, your Gmail.
Oh,
or
I didn't see it.
Okay.
We can just really quickly say who's not answering what, because there's some questions that people expect a certain answer just because I'm Black, but I'm not. I wasn't born here. I was born in a different place, and I was born in Zimbabwe. And I'm just trying to only say my truth. And
that's all we want.
Some questions I feel demand for me to say that what's happening in general to general Black people, but it's not true, because I'm giving you what you want. So I'm gonna pass on questions. I want to give you what's true and actual to me.
That's perfect. And that's all we want. Like, that's all I want for this is the truth of what you guys feel. without feeling like we're pushing or anything. So we'll just have the conversation about it. And if there's a question that I ask and let's say Rumbi answers it and you guys don't want to, not everyone has to answer every question. Like, it's just going to be a conversation. It won't even hopefully seem like I'm purposely asking questions. Like I'm going to try to draw them into, some will, but for the most part, it'll be like a conversation that we're having. Okay. I'm going to start Facebook Live. Are you guys ready? So the order is I'm going to start Facebook Live now, and then I'm going to come back and I'll start the Zoom. People will come on, so I'll kind of chit chat for the first couple of minutes just to allow everyone to get on, and then we'll get into some questions.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, here we go. I'm so excited. Okay, let's see if I can make Facebook work, because sometimes it doesn't work. Oh, I think it's going to work, you guys.
I love when technology works.
Sometimes it wouldn't, and I've learned that I have to actually have the Facebook page open in order for it to work. Sorry, you guys. You guys can talk.
Yeah, Rumbi was. Hold on.
Okay, it is rolling. Okay, we are live on Facebook, you guys. So hi to everyone who is going to join us on Facebook. It could take a couple of minutes. So, and I'm just going to start our webinar right now as well. So I'm just so happy that you guys are here to join us. So excited about that. Let's give it a second here. And I want to say hello to the people that are jumping on to join us on Zoom. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. It's a lot easier to get questions from the people who are on Zoom than checking the Facebook. So it's always nice that people can join us here on Zoom as well as watching on Facebook. So good morning, everybody. Good morning. Okay. So we were just having a little pre-panel discussion before we went live here on Zoom, and we were chatting, and I was letting the ladies know that I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous about today, and so excited about today that I have these wonderful women joining us on the panel discussion today. So I'm going to introduce them in a moment. First, I just want to say good morning to all of you who are jumping on. Please say hi if you want. There's a little chat box that you can say hi. You can ask questions. There's a Q&A button that you can put your questions in there, or you can put them in the chat. So please just say hi if you like in there. You can say where you're from, where you're watching from if you like. You can add that in there so we can see where you were from, where you're joining us today. We are also debating on if we are going to do these webinars all summer. We've been sort of trying to figure out if people want to watch webinars during the summer or not. So if you have any opinions about that, feel free to throw that in the chat. Do you want these to continue during the summer? And if you do, maybe you can even put down a topic that you want to learn about or someone that you want to hear from. So you can add that down there in the chat as well if you like. And with that, we're going to keep going. So like I said, a little nervous today and very, very, very excited. I write for a magazine. It's called Wings Magazine, and I do a column for Wings Magazine. So, you know, the editor said, hey, are you going to write an article this month? And I said, yes. So I sat down and I was going to write an article for this magazine. And everything I started to write just wouldn't work. And so I just kept deleting things, and I kept thinking, with everything that's going on in the world today, I really need to speak to a Black woman in aviation. Like, that was the only thing that was sort of making sense. And so I thought, well, I'll make a call and I'll find somebody. Well, I made one call, and then I made another call, and then I made another call, and then I sent some emails. I could not find a Black woman in aviation. And I was like, how can this be? I just don't even understand how this can be. So anyway, I finally got a hold of someone who knew Zoey. So I found Zoey, beautiful Zoey, and she was wonderful enough to do the article with us. And then she introduced me to her flight instructor, Johannah. So we've invited Johannah, and then we found Rumbi. So I want to introduce you to these ladies, and today we are going to talk about the women first. I want to introduce you to them, and we'll learn about how they got into aviation, why aviation, what made them passionate about aviation. And then we're going to move a little bit more into the whole conversation surrounding Black Lives Matter and what that means, and maybe what that means to them. And I'm really hoping that we can educate ourselves. I want to be educated because I've learned a few things. And I'm hoping that we can be maybe educated and take something away from this conversation that can make us better people. One thing for sure that I learned was that I've always said that color doesn't matter. It just didn't matter to me what color people were. Pretty much anything. My mom lived with a partner for 30 years, and I never thought anything of it. My daughter is married to a man from Shanghai, and I just don't think about these things. But I've learned that maybe that's wrong, that I'm wrong in my thinking in that way. So we're going to find out from these wonderful women. So without further ado, I want to introduce Zoey. Zoey's training on an Airbus 321, and we'll find out how that's going right now with everything going on in the world with COVID. Rumbi is an aerospace engineer, and we're going to learn about her. And Johannah, a flight instructor who actually trained Zoey. So good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Oh, good afternoon. Right.
Thank you for
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just so pleased to have all three of you on today. And here we go. We're going to start with some questions. So first, Rumbi, why don't we start with you? Can you tell us a little bit about you, what you do for a living, and then maybe we'll move into why did you decide to go into that?
Oh, yeah. So my name is Rumbi, and I'm an engineering specialist at Jazz Aviation, which is a chorus aviation company. And we fly Air Canada Express routes. I was born in Zimbabwe, and I grew up in Zimbabwe, the US, and Canada. So travel and adventure has always been part of my life, seeing places and being able to interact with people from different walks of life. And that was, a big part of what informed who I became.
Wow. Okay, thanks. Johannah, how about you?
I'm a flight instructor. I've been instructing for a little over 5 years, and why I wanted to fly ever since I was a kid, I guess. Ever since I discovered planes, I love planes. I'd ask my parents to go to the airport. Some kids want to go to the park. I would ask him, please go to the airport. And they would take me, every time a relative was going away, they would take me. It has this ridiculously, obnoxiously loud 747s that have this screaming sound. When you give it all your power, they're just really loud. And as a kid, I've always thought, I want to be in charge of the person who does that to those planes. And then, because I love roller coasters, and when nobody's around, maybe I can do a swirly-woo before I get home. But basically, as a kid, I wanted to be a pilot because I really loved how 747s work.
Wow. And Zoey, how about you? Well, you have a pretty interesting story about getting into aviation. It was love at first sight?
Not quite. Hello, everybody. I'm Zoey. I am a pilot in training, Airbus A321. Unfortunately, my training has been halted right now due to the pandemic, but I'm hoping to return to the skies soon. For me, it wasn't exactly love at first sight for aviation, and I grew up in Southern Ontario around an airport and saw small planes overhead. And the first time I took flight with an instructor, I was incredibly scared. So it's been a long journey to get here, but I'm excited to share a lot about it with you.
Oh, thanks, you guys. So let's go into so you wanted to be you wanted to get into aviation, and you're in aviation now. What were some of, can you talk about your hurdles? Like how did you really have to, a big hurdle that you had to face, that you had to overcome in order to make it happen? Like Zoey, I know for you it was basically finding a love out of what maybe scared you a little bit at first.
Yes, definitely. So my first introductory lesson, took a little encouragement. Originally, I wanted to maybe be a doctor or an engineer, but with some encouragement from my father, I decided to try an introductory flight lesson. And the day I went up, it was bumpy. I felt sick to my stomach. My knees were shaking. My palms were sweaty. And once we got back on the ground and the engine stopped, I just thought to myself, there is absolutely no way I'm going back up there again. I'm not doing this. I tried it. That's it. So when I went home, I couldn't quite shake that experience from my mind. I kept thinking about it, and speaking with my dad and getting some mentorship, I realized that the way you deal with fear, the first time you see it, often can be how you deal with it for the majority of your life. So I made a decision while I was still in high school, and with a lot of encouragement from my family, to get back into a Cessna and to learn how to fly. And once I passed that stage of fear, I fell in love with flying, and I decided I'm going to be a pilot. This is what I'm going to do.
Wow, what a great lesson on how to overcome fear. Are you afraid of anything now?
Still roller coasters.
Oh, okay. Okay. Rumbi, how about you? Was there a big hurdle that you had to get over in order to become an aerospace engineer?
I think part of it was just deciding to become an aerospace engineer. So, I mean, I loved aviation as a kid. I remember the first flight that I can actually remember taking was a transatlantic flight. We were going to the US to see my mom's sister, and we got to take a little plane and then a bigger plane and then like a regional plane. So I kind of got to take different sized planes, and I loved all of them. And I loved our layover. I was sitting looking out the window at all the planes taking off. I got to go into the cockpit of a 747 during the flight because they were so loud to visit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be a pilot. And for years and years, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And then in high school, I found out that to be a fighter jet pilot, you had to have good eyesight. And I have a pretty nice, strong prescription on my glasses. So I was kind of like, okay. They would let me be like a flight engineer, but not the actual pilot if I was going to take any of the other types of aircraft. So then I thought, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm pretty good at arguing. I can argue this point. But a couple of my teachers were like, you like science and math, and you love all the hands-on stuff, all the experiments we get to do, the problem solving. You should look into engineering. So I looked into the different types. There was chemical and computer, and I applied for those. And then my parents kind of went, you've loved aviation since you were a kid. You should look at aerospace engineering, duh. And then I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So it took a while for me to sort of slide into that and find where I could fit in aviation. And then I found it. I was like, this is my own. This is awesome.
I love the guidance that you've had.
Yeah, I had really good, like a lot of people don't recommend females go into things like engineering. So I think if it wasn't for like my teachers, because it was my math teacher, my physics teacher, and my computers teachers who said that, whereas my guidance counselors was giving advice to people who had grades like mine to go into engineering if they were boys, but if they were girls, just saying, go into medicine. So if it wasn't for them and my parents all being like, engineering makes sense for you, I might have missed out.
I'm not going to say what I'm thinking. For any of you who are listening, what do you think about that, about the guidance counselors not, guiding girls in one direction and boys in another direction? Feel free to write something in the chat if you want. But I hope that's over. I hope that today that the guidance counselors, and I'd like to believe that the guidance counselors today are not doing that. Do you think I'm right, Rumbi?
I think so. Like, I've started doing a lot of talks with schools, just being able to talk to both teachers and parents and kids, and making them know that it's not so weird. There aren't that many. Like, I'll still go to meetings, and there'll be a technical meeting where it's 10-15 people and I'm the only female in there, but it's not weird for a girl to want to be an engineer. And so that they can see an example and be like, oh yeah, okay, it'll be accepted because I'm in a pretty good job and I like what I do, and I hope that I can translate that.
Thank you. Johannah, what about you?
My hurdles, and for me, initially, it just seems like getting a license was extremely elusive. I wanted to be a pilot since I was a kid. I was going to be a pilot when I was back home, but that line of work seemed to be reserved for specific kind of people. And besides, you had to have lots of money. Like, my mom had to sell her house, my grandmother had to sell her house, probably other close relatives too had to, just so I can be able to get my license. So that was ridiculous, out of the question, obviously. So I decided to come to Canada, work for myself, and get my own licenses. And I did. I came over, and when I got here, when you're back home, they tell you it's so easy to get a job in Canada. But I was working minimum wage jobs. I was working in little airports, and I was saving money so that I can get my license, fly out of a private school and get my license. But it just seemed every time I go, okay, I'm ready now. I'm about to go get my licenses. Something major would happen that would require me to part with my money. But eventually I went to a college, and I got my licenses, and all of them now. And yeah.
Wow. And now
So,
you teach.
Now I teach. So my hurdles are a little bit different. They're very external. It was finances and family and life, basically.
Yeah. There's a couple questions here that I'll ask. Captain McKee, hello. Thanks for joining us again. He has a really great question here. It says, did you always have the full backing of your family throughout your career choice? Were they behind you 100%?
Except my grandmother. My grandmother was always behind 100%. But when I told my family as a kid that I want to be a pilot, they'll just joke about it. Oh, she'll change her mind when she grows up, because girls don't really do that. And they didn't discourage me per se. They just thought I'll grow out of it because girls don't do that. Why would you want to do that? You're not supposed to do that. They didn't have a right answer or a proper answer why I shouldn't do it. But they did tell me I shouldn't. But my grandmother, she's a trailblazer. She's just a different kind of woman. She was a different kind of woman. And she would constantly, all the time, tell me, doesn't matter what it takes. If I have to sell all of my cows, it doesn't matter. If I have to go brag on the whole entire neighborhood, you don't listen. You're just gonna go and you're gonna be a pilot. It doesn't matter what it takes. Just go and do it. Don't even listen to anybody. So everybody eventually became my cheerleader, but originally it was just my grandmother.
Wow, that's a really cool story. I love your grandmother. Zoey, I'm assuming your family was 100% behind you. Your dad was probably a champion for it.
Yes, my father has been a huge champion for anything that I wanted to do. He raised all of his kids mostly as a single father, and he very much encouraged us to dream big, have ambitious goals, and to work hard towards them. There certainly have been off remarks or people who said I didn't know, women flew planes, and he's always come to my defense and really is the foundation of the person that I am and the ambition that I have to, bring more diversity and more young women into this field. So I had a lot of family support, and I continue to have a lot of family support to this day.
Wow, that's so important. Rumbi, how about you?
Yeah, I've always had support from my family. They were less thrilled about the idea of my becoming a pilot. But once I settled into engineering, they were 100%, like, always encouraging. There'd be times where, like, we'd be having labs run late, or I couldn't get experiments, and I'd be texting them and be like, this is really hard. What was I thinking? And they'd be like, you can do this. I know you can. So both my parents and a lot of my family have always been like, 100% go for it. You can do this. And I think the day I graduated, my parents were prouder than I was for them to do that.
Aw, that's so nice. Okay, here's another question from Perry. Hi, Perry. Okay, learning to fly has always been expensive. With the 2 recent short flight tests of all electric-powered small planes, will this finally at least slow down the price increases of flying, if not even make flying more affordable? Or is the electric plane just too far off in the future? Does anyone want to comment on that? Any thoughts?
I can comment a little bit. I'll try to. I am extremely excited about the opportunities electric planes will bring to flight training, or even commercial operators that operate short haul flights, even float planes as well. We definitely saw an electric float plane out in Vancouver, I believe, in the last couple of years. However, it's hard to put it all together to find out what this means for the future of aviation. It's definitely expensive. I would recommend looking into flight schools if you're interested in flying. There are government subsidies and OSAP that can help, provide that financial support for your dreams and goals. And first and foremost, just don't give up. It's possible. So.
Yeah, and it's really nice. It sounds like you guys have all had support, which is really nice. One of my favorite topics, I guess, is mentorship. And, that's one of the things we do at Elevate Aviation is provide mentorship. And I think you guys, from what I'm hearing, you all can contest to the fact that it's so important to have someone, a champion there or a mentor there to help you navigate the process of how to become a pilot, how to become an aerospace engineer, how to become basically anything, and to have that support cheering you on, even having a cheerleader cheer you on, saying that you can do it when other people say that you can't. Okay, here's a tough question. We knew we were going to get into some tough questions, and tough question, he says. Have any of you been in a situation where you have a trainee or someone you are working with that did not want to train with you because you are a woman of color? Does anyone want to take that question?
Maybe I'll take it. For me, it was actually the opposite. So they I'm a flight instructor, and I worked with this person, and they were a great pilot, and we were not friends, but when before their major tests, they would call for reassurance, and when they passed, they would call me to thank me, and would celebrate together. What was bizarre at the end was they just came up and just told me straight up that they were racist. This was just overwhelming to me. And I thought for sure this person does not know the definition of racism. Like, how can we go through what we've gone through, and then they just decide based on my skin color, not that I'm an equal, but I'm not their superior, because that's basically what it means, right? That other skin type is superior. And it turns out they did know the definition, and our experience did not change much. They're very grateful for the experience, and that was it. But yeah.
Wow.
They did not ask not to be trained by me because I was a girl, but they did ask. They did tell me later after. I'm not sure why they didn't, because every place that I've ever been an instructor, it's okay to have an instructor change. Sometimes you can give a reason, sometimes you don't have to give a reason. You just go and request. They didn't. They just decided to go this way. And it was just bizarre for me.
Interesting. Okay, so this is leading us into our second section here about Black Lives Matter. So here's my first question for you. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning. like I really never thought that I had to notice color. Like I never went around saying I'm colorblind, but I guess if someone asked me, that's what I would say. I would say, I don't care. Like you're a human. Like, shouldn't we all be human? Like I said, I have experience in my life of different people with different likes, dislikes. None of it really matters. But now I'm learning that that's wrong, that I think that way, and that I should notice color. Does anyone want to take this on and talk about this a little bit?
I'll start.
Okay, thanks.
Johannah's
saving me.
I want to say that that's fabulous that you think that way, and that's fabulous that you have this view of the world. But I want to say, please see me. Please see my color, because it means you see me. And it's great. That's all I've ever wanted ever since I discovered what racism is. I lived in Zimbabwe, and apartheid went on for a very long time. And even though I have a lot of relatives in South Africa who would go visit, even though it wasn't happening to me directly, I understood what that actually meant. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that you see me as just another human, but I want you to be able to see me and see that I am Black. Otherwise, I'll disappear into this Canadian melting pot of ours. It's great, but because if you don't, and I'm being subjected to exaggerated brutality, you as a distant global citizen will go, oh, that cop was maybe too brutal on that person. But if you see me and you see that this cop is constantly brutal on specifically people of my color, not just everybody, they handle the same situation differently just because of the pigmentation of my skin color, maybe it takes you to be mad on my behalf to be able to change. Because I've been saying, or we've been saying for the longest of time, that we want this to change. It's just like how slavery ended. I think it doesn't matter how much Black people would have wanted it to end, but if we didn't have all those sympathetic voices around us and all those sympathetic views around us, we'll probably be still in that situation. So we will speak, we will go for demonstrations and everything, but maybe it takes distant people like you to be able to see my color, to help me voice maybe what I'm not, maybe, or what I'm not, translate what I'm not saying properly, even though I'm the best teller of my own story. But yes, I would prefer that you see me.
Well, I'm sorry, you made me so emotional when you said to see you. Like it made me feel like just so ignorant for the way that I have been, by thinking that it didn't matter. So this is like, I knew this would be educational for me. I didn't think it'd make me so emotional. So don't look at me. I apologize for that. Does anyone else want to comment on that before we move on to another question?
I'm happy to comment.
Okay, we'll go with both. Rumbi, do you want to start?
Yeah,
okay.
So I'll add to that.
Don't make me cry.
I'll try not to. Like, racial identities are part of who people are. They can be an instant source of like belonging, acceptance, historical heritage, and stuff like that. So not seeing race can be like an artificial way to dismiss that and ignore a whole part of someone. And it's not so much that people are different, but society attributes different treatments to and perceptions based on race. So then those identities then become a reason for people having different experiences, different positions, and in ignoring that, ignores that there are some systematic things that person might be experiencing, and that might be informing how they feel about certain things. So you can't really understand somebody if you're going to ignore a whole part of them.
Zoey?
Yeah, all very well said,
Yeah.
and definitely touched on the points I wanted to add as well. But we have to recognize the struggles and challenges of minority communities, and that's having these conversations that, again, you could be a little nervous of approaching, but we have to speak about them in order to, move forward as a united community. We have to talk about the experiences of being a Black woman in this world, or a Black man in this world, or a minority in this world, and what that means to our experience. Also, if you don't mind, I'd love to go back to the Q&A or the question here about trainees not wanting to fly with you because you're a woman of color. I actually have had that experience as well. And at the time I was teaching, of all the other people around me were men, and a lot of my students didn't believe that I was as capable and didn't have an issue saying that, wanting to switch, not wanting to fly with me, not believing me when I was correcting them on things. And it was a very steep hill to climb to just be on the same level of respect that I found my colleagues had. So it was definitely a big lesson. And again, mentorship and being able to talk to somebody about it was very, very crucial in getting through that experience.
So we talk about women in aviation a lot, and we talk about, things that women have had to overcome to be comfortable in aviation, and that men have had to overcome to be comfortable with that as well. But this is like another level. Would you agree? Like, this sounds like it, like, so you're not only, it's not only that you're a woman in aviation, but you're a woman of color in aviation. And so that brings another level to it that I guess can be tough sometimes, especially, Zoe, when you're having those conversations with people. So Erica has a question here. She's saying, how can we, by the way, hi Erica, how can we continue to advance inclusion for Black women in aviation? What does inclusion really mean or look like, especially when it comes to the complexity and the intersectionality of identity? And how do you think the industry needs to evolve?
That is a big question.
Yeah, there's so many parts to it. But if they're not, I want to say advertised, but I don't know exactly because I didn't go to school here. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what a pilot is. But I think it takes them to see somebody else who's in that spot to be able to go, okay, maybe if they can do it, maybe I can do it. There's just some people who don't need that. There's some people who just go, this is what I want to do. I don't know what's out there. This is what I'm going to do. But there's some people who, I guess that's why we have superheroes. That's why Marvel does so well, because it takes seeing somebody who's in that position to be able to go, oh, you know what, that looks fun. That looks doable. If I can do it, I'm going to go and do it. So maybe the first part would be to expose themselves to the places where we find dense populations of Black youths that are trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. I guess Zoe can go on and say what you wanted to say.
Yeah, I definitely would love to add to that. Representation is incredibly important. And a little story that I have is when I started flying as an airline pilot, as a regional airline pilot, I had the hat on and the full uniform, and I would walk through these major airports all over North America, and I would be stared at. People would look at me because they hadn't seen a Black woman in uniform prior. And I remember coming home and saying I felt so uncomfortable, telling my dad, I feel so uncomfortable. Everybody's staring at me. I just want to do my job and disappear and come home. And the words he told me were, you have to be visible. You have to be the person that young Black girls look at it and say, she's in that uniform. I could be in that uniform too. He's like, you are representing, and you are the role model for other little girls who never believed or never thought that flying an aircraft was a possibility. So I think representation is huge.
And I'll add to that and just rereading her question to make sure I get all the parts. In terms of advancing inclusion, like, I think a lot of it has to start early. Like, people know what a pilot is. They're front-facing parts of aviation that are easily visible, and people are like, okay, I know what that is. But there are also a lot of jobs in the background that people don't even get to know about. So if somebody doesn't know something exists, they won't come out looking for it. For me, you know, every time I say, okay, I'm an aerospace engineer and I work in aviation, people kind of think, oh, okay, you know, you must work on the aircraft. And I'm like, well, no, I'm actually, you know, behind that and doing the drawings, I'm doing the analysis. I have to be creative enough to figure out somewhere to fit a new widget into a panel that won't, you know, be in a position that annoys the pilots. It's got to meet glare requirements. So there's a lot of creativity that happens there. And I don't think people realize the variety of jobs that are available. So just getting that out, and also where you recruit. If a community has always been put down and so it's poor, they can't afford to go to university or to get pilot training because it is expensive. Like for me, my parents had to co-sign my student loan, but I knew that existed. I knew that was there. You know, I got scholarships that helped pay through. But if young girls don't know that there's things that they can access to get that education, and people who can help them, you know, figure out what kind of jobs are there, let them see who's out there, then they won't look at aviation at all. So it just being able to put that in front of people.
Mm-hmm. So can someone talk about why did I have such a hard time finding you three? Why is there not more representation inside of aviation? I'm glad I found you all. We're gonna get you out speaking and inspiring and whatever you guys want to do, but what do you think?
I can take this question to start.
Okay, Zoe?
One of the things that I've noticed through my volunteering and trying to get out in the community and speaking, especially with young women about aviation, is something that I hear that was alarming for me was a lot of young girls said, I didn't know that was an option. I didn't know I could do that. And again, I think it was beautifully touched on throughout this conversation that we do need representation more. And when you go into chapters and you buy a book about an aircraft, you know, it would be beautiful to see a Black female pilot. And one of my cousins, I went to go look for a book. That's exactly what happened. I went to chapters to try to find a book with a female pilot, and I found it incredibly hard to find one. And there was only one in the whole store. So I think showing kids in kindergarten at a young age, a pilot can look like anything, a doctor can look like anything, and really breaking these stereotypes of what we believe certain roles should look like or what you should look like to fit into certain roles is important.
Thank you, Zoe. Rumbi, did you have something to say to that?
Yeah, it's just basically following on with Zoe, and if companies are going into recruit in places that have a specific demographic, then only that demographic is going to go and look for jobs for it. So I think places have to be more willing to look outside of their usual bubbles and expand and look at different areas, go to different communities, do outreach. And I know that a lot of progress is being made in that. Like, I've gone to talk to schools and doing outreach, and had the same experience with Zoe, where, you know, people come up after and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, like, I didn't A, know this kind of job existed, and B, like, that's really cool to see somebody like you in that position, because, you know, my image of an engineer is, for most people, like, old white dude. Mm-hmm. So just showing that it can be look like anything. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. If you have an interest, then that opportunity is available for you.
I know that Jazz is doing, you know, a really good job at trying to make that happen as well. I know they have their inclusion diversity conference. I've been to one a couple of years ago, and I do know that they have different programs that they're trying to maybe reach outside the norm, as you said, the normal places that they go, and really try to make aviation inclusion inclusive for everybody. I know I was talking to a snowbird pilot, and she said she was at an air show and the snowbirds were going by and they were announcing the people's names, the pilots of the snowbirds, and one of them was a female. And she said it took that instant, she went, there's a female flying? And then she went, I want to do that. And then she did. She went on to do that. But it took, it's almost like permission to say you can do this. It, like seeing someone else that looks like you, that sounds like you, doing something gives you sometimes just unblock something you didn't even know was there, and you go, I can do that.
Mhm.
And that's what you three are doing here today.
Yeah.
And I think,
Sorry,
yeah.
Johannah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, I was going to totally agree with what Zoey and Rumbi is saying and give an example. So when my daughter turned 1, I asked for predominantly books, and everybody knows I'm a pilot. So everybody thought I would be enthused if everybody brought me a pilot book. And I have so many. I was just looking, I have the little library right here, and I wanted to show all of them. There's a cat pilot, there's a dog pilot, there's Mr. Small pilot, but there's not one. I have at least maybe 13 different ones. There's not one female pilot in all the books that I've been given. And to comment further on why is there only 3 of us, I think in the whole entire of Canada, I don't think there must have been somebody else. But you know, for women, it's challenging. A man can have 16 children and he can still satisfy the full schedule of a pilot. He can have 5 families if he wanted to, and he can still go. But as a mom, it's really challenging because now I'm a mom. So maybe there have been female pilots that have started, whether they're of color or not, and they've had to stop, or they've had to find other things that maybe suit their families better, because it's just not as easy. Maybe that's why they don't exist, on top of what Zoey and Rumbi said.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions we have, it says, you're all young women. Have you had any issues with age in addition to gender and race?
Yeah.
Rumbi, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of people don't expect someone who's young to do certain roles. So, you know, I know when I first started, like, people were asking the other people in my office, they're like, did they just hire like a kid in their office? Like, because I looked too young to be responsible for safety of an aircraft. Like, I'm literally, my job is to make sure that whatever we do to the aircraft, people don't have to think, oh, did the person who was designing this know what they were doing? We have a pretty robust safety system in Canada, especially for airworthiness. And most people expect that somebody doing that job is gonna have like 30 years of experience, but they had to start somewhere. And so there's sort of like that first period where you're kind of trying to be like, okay, I know stuff too. Because when you walk in, they kind of go, wait, you're the engineer?
Oh. Johannah?
Thank you for saying I'm young, but I'm not that young. But yeah, when I used to work up north, I did have this questions. So I would come out of a plane, and it's a small airline, so you're the pilot and you're the flight attendant, and you do the baggage as well, and you're flying this big plane, and they're asking, oh my gosh, are you flying that you're the one who's flying the plane? Oh, thank goodness there's that guy to help you out, because I don't think it's very safe at all. Or I don't think you know enough. Maybe you did get your license because there's standards, obviously. They just don't give out licenses. So maybe you did pass, but I don't know if you know enough to get out of trouble if you get in trouble. But then part of pilot training for every single pilot is to go through the emergencies. You don't go forward if you can't go through that part. But yeah, for me, at the time when they thought I was younger, that's what I got from most of the people that I was flying with.
And Zoey, how about you?
Certainly, I definitely have had comments or people just curious about how old I am. I certainly look a lot younger when I put on a uniform that is a little bit too big because I am a smaller person. And I've flown with pilots. I've had amazing flight attendants that have mentioned too, I'm about the age of their kids. And I've gotten questions as well on just the responsibility at a younger age. I began flying commercially with passengers when I was 20 years old. So I certainly get questions about that responsibility at that age. And what I would like to say to that is when I put on my uniform, I have a job and I know what the requirements are of me. And I put in the studying behind the scenes just like everybody else. And I put in the work and I go to work every day and I tell my coworkers, I'm here to learn. I want to learn something new every day so that I can be better at this job. And being young isn't a reason why you can't do something. It's just putting in the work and studying hard. So yeah, it's definitely doable.
Wow. Okay, that was a great question. Here's a question from Facebook. Hi, Rachel. Rachel wants to know, would it be helpful for flight schools, airlines, and other aviation organizations to come out and make statements condemning racism and committing to diversity and inclusion within their ranks? Johanna, you work at a flight school. What do you think? What are your take on that? What's your take on that?
Well, for flight schools, actually, most of our business seems to be international students. So they wouldn't survive. Any flight school in general, especially the private ones, it would be tough to survive, I guess, without that clientele. But it would definitely help. I think, I'm trying to think of what kind of platform that would have to be on, but anybody who can condemn it, especially people that are held at such great or high, that are held in high places, I want to say, it'll definitely help.
So,
Yeah,
go ahead. Was that you, Rumbi? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just a thought to add to that. Like, I think it's important not just for places to make comments, but to actually put action behind their words. Like, it's fair and fine to post a square and say we support diversity and inclusion, but behind the scenes there have to be programs that show that, or even just like I'm thinking of the example from my work. Like, there's like diversity inclusion groups. The recruitment has, like, in the time that since I started to now, which is 4 years, like when I started, there were barely any women in the hangar. And it wasn't quite as diverse, but the company made a lot of effort, put through programs to diversify their recruiting and get out there in front of more people. And the change is significant enough that when I first started, the hangar had one stall washroom for women, and they just renovated and actually made it bigger so that both men and women had access to, a reasonable amount of washrooms. So try and do the same thing for, supporting minorities, to show them that you're not just making a statement, but you're actually making the workplace somewhere that they would want to be.
Is the statement important too? And I'm just going to get real in a struggle that we are having at Elevate Aviation. When the whole Black Lives Matter started, down in the States, and people were posting things in support, we debated, should we post something? Should we not post something? We're about diversity anyway. Do we need to advertise that? And ultimately, we ended up not posting anything and decided to have a webinar to try to have a conversation around it instead. But I still wonder, did we make a mistake? Like, should we be posting, hashtag BLM or something? Like, do those posts matter as well, or do they not matter as much as the action?
would love to answer this one. I really am thankful, by the way, for this opportunity to have these conversations. I think this is a very important part, is that we have to be answering these questions, talking about it, being able to respectfully have differences, or say, I didn't know that I couldn't say that, or I didn't know that wasn't appropriate. So this, I hope you realize too, though, is the action. You are putting steps in place to educate yourself, as you said, and to bring this conversation into the households of other people. So thank you again for this opportunity and bringing us all together to speak on your platform. I really, really appreciate it. So I hope you don't feel as though you haven't done anything, because this is certainly an amazing thing that you've put together.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. Like, it took you guys to say yes and not think I was, crazy for wanting to share, and understanding that this is really coming from a place that we want to educate people. And you're right, like, to educate myself, like Joanna's comment at the beginning, should have braced me for that one. But to see you, like I just, it's so powerful. It's so powerful, because I honestly thought it didn't matter. Like, we're humans, why should it, and that's, so I understand that that's ignorant. So anyways, I'll move off that now, but I appreciate you guys being here and having these conversations, so that we can, like you said, go into other people's homes and educate them as well. Okay, here's another question. Moving on to another question. Is there an aviation association? And if so, what could they do to increase diversity and your visibility? I can talk about that too, but do you guys have anything, any comments on that? Is there an aviation association, and what could they do?
Well, I'll let you speak to Elevate Aviation, but there are plenty of associations. There's I'm part of a Women in Aerospace Atlantic chapter, where it brings women together, and we try and do things like professional development, so that we're helping each other learn more and grow together. It provides just a sense of belonging as well. And these associations, whenever people need speakers, for example, I started doing a summer day camp, going for the Engineers Day for Women in Science and Engineering, because somebody had asked the VP for Women in Aerospace if she knew anybody, and she suggested me. So things like that, where the associations talk to each other, and whether it's WIA, Women in Aerospace, or WISE, Women in Science and Engineering, who are having their members go out and speak when somebody says, hey, I need somebody for this, do you know anyone? That's what those associations are helpful for, getting us out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we have a long way to go. There's other organizations in Canada. I actually just joined a board of the Alberta Aviation Association, and so they're going to hear a lot about this next board meeting. I know there's different aviation associations just across the provinces across Canada, and there's places like the CCAA. Teresa, I don't think she's on today, but she's been on before, and I think collectively, I think it's getting better. The airlines are getting better. The organizations are getting better at trying to bring diversity into the workplace. So here's a really tough question. I don't know if you guys will want to answer this one. This is something that I face. When we're talking to men and sometimes women about bringing diversity into the workforce, there's always, not always, but often there's a pushback saying it's about the best person for the job and that's it. And I think there's a higher picture there when you look at what it means to bring diversity and have a diverse workforce, and what that means for the world, really, that a lot of people don't understand, or they just don't choose to look at right now because they don't have to. They're in their life and they're living their life, and they don't really choose to look at that. How do you guys feel about that? How do you guys feel about organizations purposely going out to get diversity in their workplace when maybe some of the employees are saying, why? Do you ever have those conversations with people? Like, because I have them often where I have to sort of explain myself and why it's important, and sometimes I choose to have the conversation, and honestly sometimes I don't, depending on who I'm talking to, because it's like they don't want to hear the answer anyway.
I think it's very important. I'm going to go off aviation here. I'm not going to say, I'm going to give an example that not at all what we're talking about. So I used to live in Brampton, where it's predominantly brown and black people, but you would go to the city council. I think white people in Brampton is a very small minority, and not the whole entire place, but at the time that I was there, it's predominantly white people. You go to the police station, it's predominantly white people. You go to all these major places that people go for help, and it's somebody else, even though your community is definitely a certain it's a certain people. You go there and it's not at all the same. I think it's very important for those places to represent the places that to represent the people that live in that place. It totally absolutely makes sense. And then asking about diversity in the workforce, they should absolutely try and be as diverse as they possibly can. Try and get women, try and get women of color, try and get for the same reason. Because even though the Canadian population is mixed with, like I said before, it's a melting pot. It doesn't make sense that predominantly the engineers or the pilots are predominantly white males. But I guess in this case, it's a manly job. So I went on a plane once, a long time ago, just before I got my licenses, and I was in a WestJet plane. I probably shouldn't have said that, but at that time, I was so super pumped, and because the guy who was flying was a black person, and I went there, I'm like, this is awesome, I found a black person. There's probably so many of you because you work here. And he said at that moment, in that time, he was the only black male that was a pilot, which was, to me, I dismissed it. I told him, you know what, you must be new, you probably don't know all of your coworkers. This does not make sense. But I was relatively new in Canada, and I did not realize that could have been true, and that was a long time ago. But yeah, to go back to the question, it's important to represent your community. If you have a certain number of black females, they should be represented. If you have females, they should be represented. If you have people of color, if you have First Nations, if you're flying up north, and it's predominantly First Nations. What are the First Nations pilots? But that's a totally different story.
Mm-hmm. I'd also love to add.
Go ahead, Zoe.
Sorry about that. Also flying up north to northern Ontario, and again, representation of the First Nations community. I think that's also a very important topic as well. I think the root of this comes down to what we would all love to see is equal opportunities for youth, right? That's why we're here. That's why we mentor, is to bridge the gap of, the circumstances you're born into, and trying to get you to a place where you have all the opportunities available to you. And that's also something, again, we need to work on as well in the First Nations community. And volunteering and speaking with First Nations youth is something, again, that I was told was important as well. Just, I didn't know I could do that, talking about the opportunity of getting into aviation. So I think that's where our focus certainly should be.
So we're almost out of time. We talked about this already, but I'm gonna ask the question anyway. If there's anything else you want to cover on this, what more can the industry do to advance inclusion and belonging so that minorities feel safe to be authentic rather than perhaps feeling the need to blend in or cover? Is there anything else that you guys want to leave a message for the aviation industry itself to do better at?
think a very good point that was covered on early that might seem simple to others was the topic of bathrooms. Talking about being a female in aviation, I've been to many aviation institutions where there is one bathroom for females and a large bathroom for males. And even things like that, when a renovation is done to have equal amount of bathroom stalls per gender, that even shows that you're focused on inclusion. And it also in a way shows too that you expect or believe there will be equal number of women and men in that field. I certainly find the bathroom conversation very interesting one on that topic.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think I'll probably go back slightly to the point about educating those who are already in the workforce. Like when the diversity programs are rolled out, for companies to make it so that people who are there understand the reasoning behind the programs, and making sure that everybody feels the opportunity to also participate in that. Like, so some people will see that and say, well, I can't help them out with that because I don't fit this or whatever. And it's not about that. It's saying, okay, everybody, let's, you don't have to look like that to go out and into different communities and say, hey, you guys, there's these cool jobs and I love what I do and you might like this too. That will show people that if they come into that workplace, people there are going to be welcoming to them, right? Mm-hmm. And also just, there's a lot of data that explains how the more diverse workplaces tend to do better because you get diversity of thought as well. Whether it's just by, diversity of age, diversity of gender, diversity of background, having people understand that we're not going to avoid this one segment. We're just trying to go out and put ourselves more in front of all segments so that we're not just aiming at one place all the time and getting all the same people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Johanna, any last words on that one? I have another question, if not. Okay. We're out of time. So this is your platform. So is there anything else that you want to say before we go? Is there any message that you want to leave us with, Joanne?
Yeah, maybe just compassion. If we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter, especially just, like I said, the Black community, or we're called a minority because there's not a lot of us to begin with. And then the other half of what could be in the workforce is either in gangs or in jails. We're not asking for handouts. We're not. We just maybe if the right people, your organizations, the government could inject invest the proper. I'm not as eloquent as these other two.
Oh, you're beautiful.
But yeah, if they can inject into our communities, especially targeting the youth, it will make a world of difference. It's not going to be very obvious right now, but as time goes on, it's going to make a world of difference if they know that they have options, because they have to choose, right? They have to choose between going to school and being in a gang, maybe because it's really cool. Maybe it's a survival technique. I'm not really sure completely. There's so many reasons. But if they're offered other options, because there's all these things that are happening in their communities. My siblings were in Scarborough. They've never seen this. When they were coming up, there was just not all of these exposure to all of these things. And so it would be great if that could change, whether it's the government, whether it's organizations, whether it's whoever it is, just take an interest and go, we're going to go and go in this community and tell them what we're all about and what else they can do.
Zoey, any last words for you? Anything you want to leave us with?
Certainly. For my last words, I definitely want to encourage continuing these conversations. about uplifting youth and diversity, not only in aviation, but diversity across the board. And from there, we need to put in the work. We need to put these things into action. And what we all want, and I think I can speak across the board, is just equal opportunities for all across the board. And we can get there. This year has been very difficult. It's been challenging, and it's a time for growth. And out of this hardship of this year and challenging, you know, what we thought we could say or what we thought was normal, we can come out better. We can come out united as a community and move forward. So just a reminder, you know, no dream is too big to achieve. And you just have to believe in yourself, look for a mentor, and work hard, put in the work.
Rumbi? Rumbi, any last words for you that you want to leave us with? Any message?
Yeah, I think just being able to continue the conversation and dialogue. Like, people don't, if people feel uncomfortable to talk about issues or to talk to somebody who's different from them, then they'll never be able to actually meet more people. And it's important to value having conversations even if they're uncomfortable, because that's what holds communities together. You get empathy for other people when you start to get to know them and understand their issues, and conversations are a great vehicle for that. So yeah, just to continue the conversation and allow more voices out there.
Okay. There is a question on Facebook that's asking where they can follow you on social media. So if you feel comfortable, you can go to Elevate Aviation, and you'll see this video of yourself, and you can put your name in there if you want. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but I just want to let you know that that was there. Thank you all. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much. This was very wonderful for me, and I hope it was wonderful for everyone who is watching here today, whether on Zoom or on Facebook or later, watching this later. I thank you all so much. I ask you who are watching, if you can share what we're doing here with these webinars. It would be great to share this around so we can have more voices that are heard. So please follow us on social media and share it, please. And sign up for a newsletter if you haven't, so you can stay in touch about the upcoming webinars. And like I always say every week, if you need a mentor or you want to be a mentor in aviation, please contact elevateaviation.ca, and info at elevateaviation.ca is our email. Please contact us, and we'll put you in touch with someone who can help guide and make your path a little bit easier, maybe inside aviation. Thank you all for watching. Again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for being here, all three of you, and let's please stay in touch.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.